humble street vendor was publicly humiliated by a wealthy influencer. But when a secret from his past was revealed, the laughter froze and a shocking truth emerged that would shatter her world forever. This is what happened when she offered to give him $1 million just to mock him, and he accepted the challenge. Leo's world was carved from wood. It smelled of pine and cedar, a clean, earthy scent that clung to his worn flannel shirt and settled in the creases of his calloused hands. Each morning he would set up his small, rickety table at the edge of the bustling city market, a quiet island in a loud, rushing river of people. On the faded velvet cloth that covered his table sat a silent, miniature forest. There were proud stags with intricate antlers, wise-looking owls with eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets, and playful foxes with bushy tails curled around their feet. Each one was born from a simple block of wood, coaxed into life by Leo's patient hands and the well-worn tools his grandfather had left him. He was not just a vendor. He was a storyteller, and wood was his language, but the stories did not sell as quickly as he needed them to. His gaze often drifted to the small, folded photograph tucked into the corner of his cash box. It was a picture of his grandmother, Sophia. Her smile was warm, but her eyes held a weariness that had deepened over the past year. The doctors used long, complicated words, but the meaning was simple and cruel. She needed a surgery he could not afford. So he carved. He carved with a quiet, desperate intensity, pouring all of his hope and his fear into the grain of the wood. Each finished piece was a prayer. Each sail a small, flickering candle against a vast darkness. His life was a study in humility, a modest existence painted in shades of struggle and resilience. He lived in a tiny room above a bakery where the scent of baking bread was a constant comforting companion. His coffee was weak, his meals were simple, but his spirit, though burdened, was not broken. He never complained. He simply worked, his focus narrowed to the task at hand. The curve of a bird's wing, the gentle slope of a deer's back. He found a quiet dignity in his craft, a connection to the grandfather he barely remembered, but whose presence he felt in the familiar weight of the carving knife. His grandfather, Elias, had been a simple man too, or so he'd been told, a man who loved wood and believed that creating beauty was its own reward. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the sun began to cast long shadows across the market square, a man in a sharp, dark suit stopped before Leo's table. He was older, with kind eyes that seemed to see more than just the wooden figures. They saw Leo. "You have his hands," the man said, his voice soft but clear over the market's din. Leo looked up, startled. "I'm sorry?" "Elias Vance. Your grandfather. I knew him well," the man explained. He introduced himself as Mr. Silas, a lawyer and an old friend of the family. He had been searching for Leo for some time. From his leather briefcase, Mr. Silas produced a thick, cream-colored envelope, yellowed with age. It was sealed with a wax stamp that had long since crumbled. "Your grandfather left this for you. He instructed me to give it to you on your 25th birthday, which, I believe, is today." Leo stared at the envelope. His birthday. He had completely forgotten. The days had blurred into a monotonous cycle of carving and worrying. He took the envelope, his rough fingers tracing the elegant faded script of his name on the front. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "A key," Mr. Silas said. "A key to your inheritance. Elias was a man of considerable means, but he believed that true wealth was something that had to be earned, not just given. He wanted you to understand the world on your own terms first. Inside the envelope, Leo found an ornate, old-fashioned skeleton key and a single sheet of paper. On it, in his grandfather's handwriting, was a short, cryptic message. The truest wealth is not what you own, but what you create. This key opens the vault of our family's real legacy. Below the message was an account number and the name of a bank, Vance Sterling Bank. Vance, the same as his grandfather. Leo had never thought much of his last name. It was just a name. Now, it seemed to hold a significance that made his head spin. Vance Sterling Bank was not just any bank. It was a monolith of glass and steel that dominated the city's financial district, a place so far removed from his world of wood shavings and market stalls that it might as well have been on another planet. "Go there," Mr. Silas urged gently. "The bank manager is expecting a representative of the Elias Vance estate. It is time for you to claim what is yours." The next morning, Leo stood before the towering edifice of Vance Sterling Bank. He wore his best clothes, which were still just a clean pair of jeans and a neatly pressed, if slightly faded, shirt. He felt like a stray dog that had wandered into a palace. The building seemed to scorn him, its polished glass reflecting a distorted, insignificant version of himself. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the heavy glass doors. The inside was even more intimidating than the outside. The lobby was a vast, cold ocean of marble and expensive silence. The air hummed with a low, powerful energy, the quiet murmur of immense wealth. Men in tailored suits and women adorned with jewels glided across the floor like silent, predatory sharks. Leo clutched the envelope in his pocket, the key a cold, heavy weight against his palm. He felt 100 pairs of eyes on him, judging his worn shoes, his simple jacket, his very presence. He was a stain on their pristine white world. He walked hesitantly toward the main counter, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. Before he could reach it, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A wave of noise and frantic energy washed through the lobby, shattering the reverent quiet. A woman swept in, flanked by a small entourage. She was a whirlwind of bright colors, loud laughter, and aggressive confidence. She was Veronica Vance. Leo recognized her instantly from the giant billboards that littered the city and the endless stream of videos that clogged up social media. Veronica was a real estate magnate, an influencer, a celebrity of the modern age, famous mostly for being famous. Her brand was built on a foundation of extravagant wealth and a particular brand of casual cruelty, often disguised as content. She was dressed in a violently pink pantsuit, draped in enough gold jewelry to sink a small ship. A young man followed her with a professional camera, live streaming her every move. Her assistants scurried around her, their faces a mixture of adoration and terror. "Hello, my darlings," she boomed to her phone's camera, her voice echoing unnaturally in the cavernous space. "Vivi here, coming to you live from Vance Sterling. We're about to make a teensy-weensy withdrawal from my latest project. We're going to be redecorating a puppy shelter with diamonds. It's for charity, obviously." Her followers, both in the bank and online, tittered with laughter. It was a joke, but not really. Her charity was always a spectacle designed to showcase her own wealth. She treated the bank staff with a theatrical disdain snapping her fingers and making impossible demands, all for the benefit of her audience. As she commanded the attention of the entire lobby, her sharp, predatory gaze scanned the room, looking for her next bit of content. Her eyes landed on Leo. He was standing near a velvet rope where a magnificent antique music box was displayed in a glass case. It was a masterpiece of woodworking with tiny, exquisitely carved figures of dancers that pirouetted on its lid. Leo was mesmerized by it, his carver's eye tracing the masterful lines, feeling a strange sense of kinship with the unknown artist. Veronica saw him, and a cruel, calculating smile spread across her face. He was perfect, the humble boy, the pauper at the palace gates, a perfect foil for her extravagant persona. She glided over to him, her camera operator in tow. "Well, well, what do we have here?" she purred, her voice dripping with condescension. The camera zoomed in on Leo's face, then panned down to his simple clothes and worn boots. "Lost, little mouse? This isn't the soup kitchen." Laughter erupted from her sycophantic followers. Leo felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He tried to step away, to make himself invisible, but she moved to block his path. "Look at him, everyone," she said to her live stream, "dreaming of things he can never, ever have." She tapped a long, manicured nail against the glass case of the music box. "You like this old thing? It's probably worth more than your entire life. Do you even know what this is?" Leo remained silent, his jaw tight. He just wanted to disappear. "Cat got your tongue?" she taunted. "Or are the big words too difficult? It's called art, sweetie. A-R-T. Something you wouldn't understand." Her insults were like sharp, stinging pebbles. He could feel the eyes of everyone in the bank on him, their faces a mixture of pity and amusement. He was a spectacle, a piece of entertainment for the rich and bored. But then she went a step too far. She gestured toward the small, worn satchel at his side, where he kept a few of his own carvings. "What do you have in there? Sad little wooden squirrels? Let me guess. You sell 'em on the street for pocket change." She had unknowingly struck a nerve. His craft was the one pure thing in his life. It was his connection to his grandfather, his legacy, his hope. To hear it mocked so casually, so cruelly, by this vapid, arrogant woman, it ignited a spark of anger deep within him. Veronica, sensing she had an audience hooked on the drama, decided to escalate. This was going to be her most viral clip yet. "I'll tell you what," she announced, her voice booming with sadistic power. "I'm feeling generous today. It's for charity, after all." She pointed a finger at Leo, her smile a predatory slash. "I will make you a bet. Right here, right now. I bet you can't even tell me the name of the artist who made this music box." She paused for dramatic effect. "But let's make it more interesting. I bet you don't have more than $1,000 to your name, not in your pocket, not in the world." The crowd murmured, leaning in. This was better than reality television. "So here's the deal," she declared, her eyes gleaming. "Prove to me that you have an account in this bank, in Vance Sterling Bank, with a balance of at least $1,000, just $1,000. If you can do that, I will give you $1 million cash, right now." A collective gasp went through the lobby. $1 million. It was an absurd, impossible sum. She was so certain of his poverty that she could offer a fortune without a shred of risk. "But," she added, her voice turning sharp and cold, "if you can't, and we all know you can't, you have to get on your knees right here and admit that you are a worthless, pathetic nobody, and you have to take one of your little wooden toys and smash it on this marble floor for everyone to see. The cruelty of the offer was breathtaking. She wasn't just aiming to humiliate him. She wanted to crush his spirit, to make him destroy the one thing he treasured. The laughter from her followers was sharp and mocking, like shattering glass. Leo looked at her. He saw the smug certainty in her eyes, the utter contempt she had for him, for everyone she deemed beneath her. He looked at the music box, at the beautiful dancing figures that seemed to mock him with their silent grace. He thought of his grandmother, of the mounting hospital bills, of the quiet desperation that was his constant companion. And in that moment, something inside him broke. The fear, the shame, the years of quiet struggle, it all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard resolve. The fire she had ignited was no longer just anger. It was fuel. He lifted his chin, his gaze steady and unwavering. He looked directly into the lens of her camera, at the thousands of unseen faces watching, judging. And then he looked at Veronica Vance. "I accept your bet," he said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the lobby like a blade. A hush fell. Veronica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, surprised by his response. She had expected him to cower, to flee, but his sudden defiance only made the game more exciting for her. "Excellent!" she chirped, recovering instantly. "The little mouse wants to play. This is going to be delicious." She gestured grandly toward the VIP banking desks. "The stage is yours. Don't be shy." The crowd parted, creating a path for him. It felt like walking toward a guillotine. Every eye was on him, every smirk, every whispered comment, a physical weight on his shoulders. He could hear Veronica behind him narrating his every step for her live stream. "He's actually doing it. Can you believe the nerve? This is the saddest thing I've ever seen. Get ready for the big finale, darlings." Leo walked to the polished mahogany desk. The bank manager, a severe-looking man named Mr. Harrison, looked him up and down with an expression of pure disdain. He had been enjoying the show, and now he was being forced to participate in its pathetic conclusion. "Can I help you?" Mr. Harrison asked, his tone implying that he very much doubted it. Leo's hand was trembling slightly as he reached into his pocket. He ignored the manager's sneer. He ignored the snickering from the crowd. He ignored Veronica, who was now leaning over the desk, her camera held high to capture his ultimate humiliation. He placed the old ornate key on the desk. Then he unfolded the crumpled piece of paper and laid it beside the key. The manager glanced at it, annoyed. "What is this?" he asked impatiently. "It's an account number," Leo said, his voice steady, "and the key to access it." Mr. Harrison sighed dramatically, a performance for Veronica's benefit. "Sir, this is a private wealth institution. We don't deal with novelty accounts." He was about to dismiss him to call security, but then his eyes properly focused on the paper. He saw the name written at the top, Elias Vance Estate. His professional composure cracked. It was a subtle shift, a slight widening of the eyes, a sudden stillness in his hands. The name was the stuff of legend within the bank, a ghost from its foundational history. With a newfound hesitant seriousness, he turned to his terminal. His fingers, which had been drumming impatiently on the desk, now moved with deliberate precision. He typed in the account number. The system requested a secondary authentication. He looked at the key. There was a small, almost invisible inscription on its shaft. He typed that in. The screen flickered. For a moment, nothing happened. Veronica leaned in closer, her smile widening. Is it saying insufficient funds in all caps? I bet it is. But it wasn't. A new window opened on the manager's screen, a window reserved for the bank's most elite clientele. Mr. Harrison's face went from pink to white. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape. He read the information, then read it again, his eyes darting back and forth as if he couldn't believe what they were seeing. The laughter in the lobby had died down to an expectant murmur. Veronica, sensing the shift in atmosphere, stopped her narration. "What is it?" she demanded. "What's taking so long? Just tell us he's broke so we can get on with our day." Mr. Harrison didn't look at her. He looked at Leo, and for the first time he truly saw him. The disdain in his eyes was gone, replaced by a profound, shell-shocked awe. He slowly rose to his feet, a gesture of respect so automatic it seemed to bypass his conscious thought. The silence in the bank was now absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with 1,000 unasked questions. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. The manager swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He cleared his throat, but his voice still came out as a hoarse, strangled whisper. "Mr. Vance," he stammered, his eyes locked on Leo. He corrected himself immediately. "Mr. Leo Vance, welcome to Vance Sterling." He turned the monitor slightly so Leo could see it. On the screen, in bold, stark letters, were the account details. Account holder, Elias Vance. Estate primary. Beneficiary, Leo Vance. Status, activated upon 25th birthday balance, $987,543,211.97. And below that, a single, devastating line. Assets. 51% controlling interest in Vance Sterling Corporation. The air left the room. It was as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the vast lobby. Leo stared at the numbers, his mind refusing to process them. It was a fortune beyond comprehension, but it was the line below it that held the true power. Controlling interest. He didn't just have an account at the bank, he owned the bank. The crowd stood frozen, a gallery of stunned statues. The phones that had been recording his humiliation were now held limply, forgotten. Whispers started to ripple through the silence like cracks spreading across a frozen lake. Vance? His name is Vance? Elias Vance? Wasn't that the founder? Oh, my God! But all eyes were on Veronica. Her cruel, triumphant smile was frozen on her face, a grotesque mask of disbelief. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking pale and ghastly under the bright lobby lights. Her perfectly made-up face contorted into an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. The camera, still live-streaming, was now capturing not Leo's humiliation, but her own. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked from the monitor to Leo, then back again. Her brain was short-circuiting, trying to connect the impossible dots. The street vendor, the pauper, Leo Vance. The name echoed in her memory, a name her father used to spit like a curse. The long-lost, eccentric brother, the ghost who had built the empire and then vanished. "No," she finally choked out, the words small and pathetic. "No, it's a trick. It's a fraud." But the look on the bank manager's face told everyone it was no trick. Mr. Harrison, now sweating profusely, bowed his head slightly toward Leo. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice filled with a terrified deference, "my sincerest apologies for the misunderstanding. How may we assist you today? Your private suite is ready, of course." Leo didn't answer. He was still staring at the screen, at the name of his grandfather, Elias Vance, the simple carver, the man who loved wood. It was all a lie. Or rather, it was only a fraction of the truth. He finally looked up, his gaze sweeping past the stunned faces in the crowd, past the now trembling bank manager. His eyes landed on Veronica. She was still standing there, paralyzed, her empire of arrogance crumbling around her in real time. The camera was a merciless witness, broadcasting her utter demolition to the world. Leo took a slow breath. The fear was gone. The shame was gone. In their place was a strange, disorienting clarity. He felt the weight of the old key in his hand, no longer just a piece of metal, but a scepter. He looked at Veronica, at her frozen, horrified face, and spoke. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was calm, clear, and carried the undeniable weight of authority. "About that $1,000,000, he said. "You can keep it. I believe I have some work to do." Mr. Harrison, the bank manager, practically fell over himself to lead Leo away from the gawking crowd. "This way, Mr. Vance. Your grandfather's private office has been maintained exactly as he left it. We can speak there." He ushered Leo through a discreet door that blended seamlessly into a marble wall, a secret passage into the bank's inner sanctum. As the door clicked shut behind them, the lobby erupted into a cacophony of frantic chatter. Veronica Vance remained motionless for another moment, her mind a maelstrom of denial and fury. Then, with a strangled cry of rage, she swiped her phone from her cameraman's hand, ending the live stream that had just documented her spectacular fall from grace. Her public humiliation was complete, and it was infinitely more profound than the one she had engineered for Leo. The office was a world away from the cold modernity of the bank. It was paneled in dark, rich cherry wood and filled with comfortable leather armchairs. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf crammed with books on art, philosophy, and history. Another held display cases filled not with trophies or awards, but with exquisite wooden sculptures. They were familiar to Leo. They were carved in the same style as his own, but with a mastery that took his breath away. They were his grandfather's work. A fire crackled in the hearth, and sitting in one of the armchairs, as if he had been waiting all along, was Mr. Silas. He smiled warmly at Leo. "I thought you might need some clarification," the old lawyer said. Mr. Harrison, still visibly shaken, began to stammer an explanation. "Mr. Vance, the account, the controlling shares. Your grandfather, Elias Vance, was the co-founder of this institution. He and his younger brother, Marcus Vance." "Veronica's father?" Leo finished, the pieces clicking into place. "Precisely," Mr. Silas confirmed, taking over. "The two brothers built this empire from nothing. Elias was the visionary, the artist. Marcus was the businessman, ruthless and pragmatic. Elias believed the purpose of wealth was to create, to support, to build a better world. Marcus believed the purpose of wealth was simply to acquire more wealth." He gestured around the room. This was Elias's sanctuary. He saw the direction Marcus was taking the company, turning it into a soulless machine for profit, and it broke his heart. They had a terrible falling out. Elias, unwilling to be a part of what the company was becoming, walked away. "He vanished," Leo said, remembering the whispers of family history. "To the world, yes," said Silas. "He took his half of the company, his 51%, and placed it in a trust. He didn't want the money for himself. He wanted to live a simple life, to return to his first love, his craft. He wanted to raise his son, your father, away from the poison of that world, and he decided to leave his legacy not to the son who might be corrupted by it, but to a grandchild he hoped would inherit his spirit, not just his name. The story was overwhelming. His grandfather hadn't been a simple man. He had been a king who had chosen to live as a peasant. He had given Leo the most valuable gift of all, a life of humility, a life where he learned the value of hard work and the dignity of creating something with his own hands. The music box in the lobby, Leo said, his voice thick with emotion. The one she mocked. An original Elias Vance, Mr. Silas confirmed with a sad smile. One of his finest pieces. The irony is staggering. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, Veronica Vance was in a full-blown meltdown. She was screaming into her phone at a team of high-priced lawyers. "I don't care what you have to do. Freeze the account. Invalidate the will. I want him destroyed. He's a fraud. A nobody street rat who got lucky." But the lawyers were hesitant. The Elias Vance Trust was legendary, an ironclad legal fortress designed by a master. Challenging it would be nearly impossible. Undeterred, Veronica launched her counterattack. She went back online, not with a live stream, but with a series of slick, pre-produced videos. She painted Leo as a cunning interloper, a con artist who had somehow manipulated a senile old man. She spun a narrative of a family tragedy, of a beloved great-uncle's legacy being stolen. She used every tool in her influencer arsenal: crocodile tears, righteous indignation, and carefully edited evidence. Her next move was more direct. She found out the name of his grandmother's hospital. She called the administrator, a man whose career she had the power to make or break, and began applying pressure. Suddenly, Sophia's file was flagged with billing irregularities. Her scheduled consultations were postponed. It was a cruel, petty act of intimidation, a clear message to Leo: "I can still hurt you." But Veronica had underestimated the ghost she was fighting. Elias Vance had not just left behind money, he had left behind a legacy of goodwill, a silent army of allies cultivated over decades of quiet philanthropy. The first soldier reported for duty that very afternoon. An email arrived from Mr. Silas from a woman named Dr. Iris Thorne, a leading oncologist. "I read the news about the events at Vance Sterling," the email read. "My research, the research that led to the breakthrough treatment for glioblastoma, was funded 30 years ago by an anonymous benefactor. I later learned it was Elias Vance. I see his granddaughter-in-law, Sophia Vance, is suffering from this very illness. My services and the services of my entire clinic are at her disposal, free of charge. It is the very least I can do to repay an old debt." The second arrived an hour later, a call from a Mr. David Chin, the principal of an inner-city school on the verge of closing. "Mr. Silas," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "Elias Vance saved my school. He anonymously paid for its reconstruction and funded a scholarship program that has sent hundreds of kids to college. I have all the records. I also have records of his brother, Marcus Vance, trying to buy the land our school is on to build luxury condos, and the pressure he applied. Veronica is her father's daughter. If you need a character witness against that family, you have one." Then came a call from a celebrated art critic, an elderly woman named Helena Rossi. "I knew Elias. He was a genius, a true artist. I also know that for the past 20 years, The Vance family has been quietly selling forgeries of his work on the private market for astronomical sums. I have the proof. I can distinguish a real Elias from a fake from a mile away. The silent army was gathering. Each person was a thread in the tapestry of Elias's hidden life, a life spent planting seeds of kindness. Now, years later, the forest was grown, and it was ready to protect his heir. Mr. Silas arranged everything. Sophia was moved to Dr. Thorne's state-of-the-art private clinic. The hospital administrator, who had buckled under Veronica's pressure, was left to stammer apologies to an empty room. Leo, sitting in his grandfather's office, felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. This wasn't about the money. It was about justice. It was about honoring the memory of a man he now understood to be truly great. Veronica, however, was far from finished. When her intimidation tactics and smear campaign failed to produce immediate results, she fell back on the language her family understood best: brute force litigation and corporate warfare. She discovered that her father, Marcus, had taken out a massive consolidated loan years ago, using the company's assets as collateral. The debt was a ticking time bomb, and a significant payment was due. She saw her opening. It was a poison pill, a move of mutually assured destruction. But she no longer cared about the company. She only cared about winning. She called for an emergency meeting of the board of directors of the Vance Sterling Corporation. Her plan was simple and vicious. She would propose a restructuring that would liquidate key assets, including the bank itself, to satisfy the debt. The move would wipe out the company's value, rendering Leo's controlling shares worthless. She would be left with a fortune from the debt repayment, while Leo would be left with the ashes of his grandfather's empire. It was her final gambit, and she was certain it was unbeatable. The country boy wouldn't understand the complex finances. He would be powerless to stop her. The day of the board meeting arrived. The atmosphere in the top-floor boardroom was electric with tension. The long, polished table was surrounded by the stony-faced members of the board, powerful men and women who had watched the Vance family drama unfold with a mixture of alarm and morbid curiosity. At one end of the table sat Veronica, flanked by her team of ruthless lawyers. She looked confident, smug, a predator poised for the final kill. At the other end sat Leo. He was not alone. Mr. Silas was by his side, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the frantic energy radiating from Veronica's side of the room. Leo wore a simple dark suit, a loan from Mr. Silas. It felt foreign and stiff, but he sat tall, his hands resting calmly on the table before him. He was no longer the frightened boy from the market. He was the keeper of his grandfather's legacy. Veronica began the proceedings. She launched into a slick, aggressive presentation filled with charts, graphs, and impenetrable financial jargon. She painted a grim picture of the company's debt, framing her proposal not as a hostile act, but as a painful but necessary fiscal responsibility. "The reality is," she said, her voice feigning regret, "that my great-uncle's quaint, sentimental approach to business has no place in the modern market. We are facing a catastrophic default. My proposal is the only logical path forward. It will satisfy our creditors, protect our investors from further liability, and allow us to rebuild a leaner, more aggressive company from the ground up." She smirked at Leo. "It's complex, I know, but some of us have to make the hard decisions." Her message was clear. This is a game for adults. You are out of your depth." The board members murmured uneasily. The plan was brutal, but on paper it seemed financially sound, a desperate measure for desperate times. They looked to Leo, expecting, what, a plea? An outburst? Confusion? Leo did not look confused. When Veronica finished her presentation, he simply nodded to Mr. Silas. The old lawyer stood up. "Thank you, Miss Vance, for that creative interpretation of the company's finances," Silas began, his voice dry. "Mr. Leo Vance would now like to present an alternative perspective." Leo remained seated. He didn't have charts or graphs. He had the truth. "My grandfather built this company on a simple principle," he began, his voice quiet but firm, resonating through the tense room, "that our wealth is a tool, not a trophy. It's meant to build things that last. Schools, hospitals, opportunities. It's not meant to fund lifestyles or to be used as a weapon." He looked directly at Veronica. "You talk about debt. Let's talk about the real debts, the moral debts." He paused, then nodded toward the door. "I believe we have some people who would like to speak." The boardroom door opened. The first to enter was Principal David Chen. He stood before the board and told the story of his school, of how Elias Vance had saved it from the wrecking ball that Marcus and Veronica Vance had tried to send. He presented documents proving their predatory real estate tactics. Next came Dr. Eris Thorne. She spoke of the life-saving research Elias had funded, and she presented evidence that Marcus Vance had actively tried to acquire the patent for her treatment through a shell corporation, intending to price it so high that only the wealthy could afford it. Then the elegant, formidable Helena Rossi walked in. She placed a detailed report on the table. "For 2 decades," she announced, "the Vance family, under the leadership of Marcus and later Veronica, has been defrauding the art world by commissioning and selling forgeries of Elias Vance's work. This report contains certified appraisals and forensic evidence. The total value of the fraud is estimated at over $200 million. A wave of shock rippled through the board members. This wasn't a business dispute anymore. It was a litany of crimes. Veronica's face had become a mask of fury. "Lies, all of it. These people are nobodies. You can't prove anything." "Oh, but we can," said a new voice. Mr. Harrison, the bank manager, stepped into the room. He looked terrified but resolute. He had chosen his side. In his hand, he held a small silver USB drive. "Mr. Vance," he said to Leo, avoiding eye contact with Veronica, "when you claimed your inheritance, it triggered a full internal audit of all Vance family-related accounts, as per your grandfather's instructions in the trust. I was alarmed by what I found." He looked at the board. "For the past 5 years, Miss Veronica Vance has been systematically embezzling funds from the corporation to finance her social media activities, lavish parties, private jets, designer clothes, a ridiculous diamond doghouse charity stunt, all of it paid for with diverted company funds, disguised as marketing expenses." He placed the USB drive on the table. "This drive contains the complete, unalterable transaction records. The total comes to just over $47 million. The final blow had landed. The room was utterly silent. Veronica's carefully constructed world had been systematically, publicly, and completely dismantled. Her final gambit was revealed for what it was, a desperate attempt to burn down the evidence of her own crimes. One of the oldest board members, a man who had known Elias, slowly stood up. He looked at Veronica with utter disgust. "I move for a vote of no confidence in acting CEO Veronica Vance," he said, his voice like stone. "And I further move to turn over all of this evidence to the federal authorities." "Seconded," came a chorus of voices. The vote was unanimous. Veronica was stripped of her title, her power, her authority. Her assets, which were inextricably tied to the company she had been looting, were to be frozen, pending a full criminal investigation. "This is not over," she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You can't do this to me. I am a Vance." "So am I," Leo said quietly from the other end of the table, "and we're going to do things differently now." Security guards entered the room. They approached Veronica's chair. For a moment, she seemed like she might fight them, but then the fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped. The arrogant magnate, the powerful influencer, was gone. All that was left was a small, defeated woman. As the guards escorted her from the room, she was met with a storm of flashing cameras. The press, alerted by an anonymous tip from Mr. Silas's office, had gathered outside the boardroom. Her downfall would not be a private affair. It would be a global spectacle, just like the one she used to create, only this time she was the one being mocked. She left the building defeated, humiliated, and utterly alone, her empire of cruelty having turned to dust. The days that followed were a blur of healing and rebuilding. Leo's first visit was to the pristine, quiet clinic where his grandmother was now recovering. The surgery, performed by Dr. Thorne herself, had been a complete success. Sophia was weak, but smiling, the deep weariness in her eyes finally beginning to recede. Leo sat by her bedside, holding her frail hand in his. He told her everything about the bank, the grandfather he never knew, the impossible fortune that was now his. She listened quietly, her gaze soft and loving. When he finished, he finally let the dam break. The years of silent struggle, of constant worry, of shouldering a burden too heavy for one person to bear, came pouring out in a flood of cathartic tears. He wept for the hardship they had endured, for the grandfather whose love he was only just beginning to understand, and for the overwhelming, terrifying relief of it all. Sophia simply held his hand, stroking his hair until the storm passed, leaving a quiet, peaceful calm in its wake. His first official act as the head of Vance Sterling Corporation was not a business decision, but a moral one. He called a press conference, not in a stuffy boardroom, but on the steps of Principal Chen's inner-city school. With the students and faculty standing behind him, he announced the formation of the Elias Vance Foundation. "My grandfather believed that true wealth is measured by what we give, not what we have," Leo said, his voice clear and steady. "This foundation will be his legacy in action." Its first initiative was to provide a permanent, multi-million-dollar endowment to Principal Chen's school, ensuring its future for generations to come. Its second was to fund a new state-of-the-art public health care wing at the city hospital, named after his grandmother, the Sophia Vance Center for Community Care. He also announced sweeping reforms within the corporation, higher wages for all employees, improved benefits, and a new corporate charter that mandated a significant percentage of annual profits be reinvested directly into community projects. He was not tearing down the empire. He was giving it a soul. That evening, back in the quiet sanctuary of his grandfather's office, Mr. Silas handed him one last item. It was another letter, this one tucked inside a worn, leather-bound copy of a book on woodworking. "Your grandfather wrote this for you personally," Silas said gently. "He asked me to give it to you only when you had truly understood the nature of your inheritance." Leo opened the letter. The handwriting was the same as the note that had come with the key, but this message was longer, more personal. "My dearest Leo," it began, "if you are reading this, it means you have found your way, not just to the money, but to the meaning behind it. I am sorry I could not be there to guide you myself, but I feared my presence would taint the most important lesson I could ever teach you, the lesson of a humble life. I ran from my family's wealth because I saw it become a poison. It transformed my brother from a dreamer into a dragon, hoarding gold in a dark cave. Wealth without purpose is a cage. It isolates you, corrupts you, and convinces you that your value lies in what you own, rather than who you are and what you create. I hope you have learned the joy of making something beautiful with your own hands. I hope you have known struggle, because struggle teaches compassion. I hope you have known what it is to be invisible, because that is how you learn to see others. I did not leave you money, my boy. I left you a responsibility. The wealth is just a tool, like a chisel or a plane. Use it to carve a better world. The harvest of good deeds is eternal. Make me proud." Leo folded the letter, his heart full. He looked at his hands, no longer just the hands of a poor street vendor, but the hands of a custodian, entrusted with a sacred duty. He was ready. The work was just beginning. 10 years later. The name Vance Sterling Corporation was no longer synonymous with ruthless capitalism. It was now a global benchmark for ethical business and corporate philanthropy. The Elias Vance Foundation had become a powerful force for good, funding thousands of scholarships, building dozens of community centers, and sponsoring groundbreaking scientific research. Leo Vance was one of the most respected figures in the world of finance and philanthropy. Yet he remained, at his core, the same humble man. He had eschewed the flashy galas and celebrity parties that had been Veronica's lifeblood. He was most often found not in a boardroom, but on the ground, visiting the projects his foundation funded. He still lived in a modest home, and his greatest pleasure was the time he spent in his workshop. It was larger now, filled with the finest woods from around the world, but the scent was the same: pine, cedar, and creativity. His hands, though they now signed checks for millions of dollars, were still the calloused, capable hands of a carver. He never sold his creations. He gave them away as gifts to friends, to children in hospitals, to people who appreciated the simple beauty of a thing made with love. One sunny afternoon, while walking through the same city market where his journey had begun, he saw a familiar sight. A young girl, no older than 12, was sitting behind a small rickety table, on which were displayed a collection of small, beautifully painted rocks. She had a focused, determined look on her face, but her shoulders slumped with a weariness that Leo recognized all too well. He approached her table, not with pity, but with a quiet respect. "These are beautiful," he said, picking up a stone painted to look like a ladybug. "You have a real talent." The girl looked up, surprised. "Thank you, sir." "How much for all of them?" Leo asked. The girl's eyes widened. "For all of them?" "All of them," he confirmed with a warm smile. He named a price that made her gasp. a sum that was likely more than she had made in a year. As he paid her, he slipped a small card into her hand. It was for the Elias Vance Foundation's Young Artists Scholarship Program. "Someone believed in me when I was just starting out," Leo told her, his voice soft. "They gave me a chance. Now it's my turn to pay it forward. Keep painting. The world needs more beauty." The girl stared at him, tears welling in her eyes, clutching the card like it was the most precious thing in the world. As Leo walked away, he felt the profound, quiet joy that his grandfather had written about. And what of Veronica Vance? Her name was now a forgotten footnote, a cautionary tale whispered in the corners of the internet. After a lengthy trial, she was convicted of fraud and embezzlement. She lost everything: her money, her fame, her followers. Upon her release, she tried to stage a comeback, but the world had moved on. Her brand of cruel, vapid spectacle was no longer in fashion. The last anyone heard, she was living in a small, rented apartment in a distant city, a bitter, anonymous woman haunted by the ghost of an empire she had destroyed. She was offered a chance at redemption once, a low-level administrative job at one of the foundation's charities. She was too proud to accept. Leo, meanwhile, continued his work. He had learned his grandfather's greatest lesson, a lesson carved not in wood, but in the very fabric of his life. The hands that create are infinitely more powerful than the hands that take. He was planting seeds, and the harvest would be eternal.